Friday, everyone.
Oh yeah, happy Friday, everybody, and happy
Yeah,
Fourth.
this is oh yeah,
Mhm.
this is part two.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
the opening of our child abuse case.
Hmm.
Um, we're gonna this is gonna be good tonight, y'all. That's all I can say. Also, I was gonna like there was some comments out there that people been making throughout the
Hmm.
week, whatever, even today. I
Hmm.
was going to address a lot of that. I'm not going to address it. I'm just gonna let the facts speak for itself.
Right.
In the transcripts and everything that we have. I'm gonna let that speak. All the evidence, because we've been mentioning it since we started up here talking about all of this before we even got transcripts. Because we are the facts. Like you said many times, Crystal, you said that. Hannah has said that. So we just gonna get into it.
Okay. So this is the second part of the
Hmm.
opening of the trial, child abuse case, part two. Before we start, this is just a little sidebar. As we open to the second part of the opening of this trial, the process of this opening has been really tricky, and but we're starting to understand more of what Julie Baldwin was doing in this case. Um, it pretty much appears to us, and it seems like her whole motive was the concern of Laura and her children only. And it shows us from reading all of this stuff that Julie was only using us for bait, meaning whatever happened to us, she was trying to pin things and incidents on abuse that happened to us that occurred, and was saying that it happened to Laura too. So we're going to get off into it right now with the reading
Yeah, show. I
of
mean, all the paperwork right there you got. Show that right there. What you popped the. Yep. It's more. Well,
paper,
we can
paper,
get to
paper.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're going to get off into the reading of this. And there's a portion that Richard would get deep off into and discuss, because I was actually shocked to read what I read. Well, we both was, but I was more shocked because I didn't know. So we're going to start with uh, off from last week, where um, Julie Baldwin was trying to do an 1109, which is a code here in California, a court code where they use previously past information that somebody might have committed to bring into court into a new trial to show that Musa, who was the defendant, had a history of doing the things that he was doing. Okay. So she gets off into
Is this
she
Julie
can't,
trying to? Is Julie right
mhm,
here? Right. This bring her
yes.
evidence.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's talking about Laura testifying and telling the judge what Laura can get off into. I mean, well,
Okay.
she's telling the judge, excuse me, everybody. She's telling the judge that when mom, our mother, get ready to testify, what she's going to testify to and
Mm-hmm.
what she can get off into.
Okay.
So, this is what Julie Baldwin states. She can be allowed to explain why is it that she was complicit in some of these acts, and why is it that she did not intervene in order to stop the abuse, because she herself was also a victim in this case, and also a victim and also a witness to the other wives of the defendant being abused as well, Lord Cowan and Adrian Easter. So then the judge steps in and he says, I will not allow any testimony from Miss Bodie to testify that she witnessed Lord Cowan or Adrian Easter being abused. So we're going to throw that out. I want to talk specifically about why was Miss Bodie complicit in allowing ongoing abuse for so many years and not getting her children any help. How would that be relevant for this case? Because she pleaded guilty to abusing her own children. Didn't she receive 17 months in county jail and a one count of child endangerment, and is currently taking child classes? So Ms. Baldwin says, right, but I think that the 1109 allows us not only to discuss when we have charges that are related to domestic violence. It's not just the named victims that fall under the umbrella or the spirit of the 1109. It's uncharged victims as well. And in this case, she has reported that she has been victimized physically and mentally by this defendant. So I believe that her testimony comes in under an 1109. So the judge states, all right, so you want to bring in testimony. You're going to call Miss Bodie. You're going to call her in and have her testify to past abuse that she went through. Yes. Okay. Then the judge states to testify in personal observation she made to the abuse of the children, right? That they suffer at the hands of the defendant. Is that correct? So Julie wants the judge to enforce and make our mother testify to abuse that she saw that happened to children and his other wives. And the judge said, I will not allow it. He said, I will only allow her to testify to any past abuse that she went through and the abuse that she was complicit in allowing on her children. So, in other words, the judge state, so she's a recipient witness to much of that of what occurred. And Julie says yes. So the judge says, all right. And then in addition, I just want to make sure I understand the scope. In addition to that, you want to be able to discuss with her the abuse that she herself suffered at the defendant's hands. And Julie says yes. He says, okay, correct. So Julie says yes. He said, okay, do you want to be heard, Mr. Morales? So Mr. Morales says, Your Honor, I think
And
it's,
that's Dad's attorney.
yeah, this is Moose's
His
attorney,
attorney.
Mr.
Okay.
Morales. He says, Your Honor, I think it's pure and simple that 1101A evidence is character evidence. It's improper, it's not probative. It's she is a co-defendant in a case. Whether she was beaten by the defendant or not during the course of their marriage is relevant. All right, anything else? He said, no, I'll submit. Okay, so then Julie Baldwin says, I'm going to include it. I want to include it. I'm excluding it again under no, the judge, excuse me. The judge tells Mr. Morales and Julie Baldwin, I'm going to exclude it. I'm excluding it again under the 302 grounds. It's a different victim than Miss Cowan. And so they wanted to do mom to come in and testify up under an 1109, which is when the abuse happened to us. They wanted her to also speak about abuse that she went through. And so the judge is excluding it because he said, according to Mr. Morales, I mean, he didn't like that for that to be placed in there because it was about children, not about the adults. So the judge said he was going to exclude it up under the grounds of a 352. It's a different victim than Miss Cowing, as well as the other acts against her, because it can show a propensity on that victim. And I do agree with that there is some probative value to having a separate wife testify. He said, hey, she might say, hey, I was abused too. So in other words, he's excluding our mother testifying about past abuse that she went through, because he said, given the fact that they allow it, Laura Cowie might go into court and say, that happened to me too.
Yep. And it's funny, we
And
did a video talking about Me Too.
yeah, We sure did without even knowing this.
Yeah, I didn't know that
And
was in there like that.
yeah, yep. And he said, I'm not gonna allow it. He said it is overweighted by the impact it would have on the jury. So now they hear about another wife being abused. She is already going to testify that she saw that she was complicit in this. So you're already going to have her up there. And now this sort of uh, thing, oh, what, he abused me too, and he beat me too, is what she might say. And he said, well, she didn't have to plead guilty, but she did plead guilty, right? And she says, I think there would be an undue consumption of time here. I think there's some question in the court's mind as to whether or not that did it happen or not. And did she kind of save face given the horrible acts are alleged? Easier for her to say, you know what? Part of the reason I didn't say anything, part of the reason I did what I did was because he was beating on me too. And that makes her look like a victim, which I'm not saying that she wasn't in the past a victim, but she's also a co-defendant. She's pleaded guilty to these charges and admitted to abusing her own children herself. And that would include that she intended to do it, that it wasn't under duress. And so I think that would take time to understand for the jury why. What's the motive behind her testifying after pleading guilty to a crime that she states she was complicit in? So I think for these reasons, under the 352, I'm going to exclude her discussing her abuse and suffering at the hands of her husband due to the fact that there was a ton of children involved. And I want to get to why she allowed the children to be abused. So Ms. Baldwin states, okay, and is that I also argue the alternative in my brief that it would be allowed in under the 1101B as motive, in that I believe that her testimony would show that the defendant does have a motive to control his wife, and he does so through violence. And I believe that motive also extends into how he ran his family and what his kids are going to testify to. But is that also the court's ruling with respect to the 1109B and bringing that in for the purpose of showing motives under the 1109 1B? And the judge says, how else were you planning on showing control here? She said, I'm sorry. He says, the judge states again, how is the testimony? How were you going to show that he was controlling? She said, Ms. Baldwin says, well, what I anticipate is that Ms. Bodie would testify to similar instances of what Ms. Cowing would say, or what I anticipate Ms. Cowing will testify to is the fact that whenever the defendant's authority was challenged with respect to anything in the house, people were beaten as a result. Kids, wives, everyone who was subjected to being around the defendant in that house, not being permitted to leave. With respect to Ms. Bodie, she actually did live in the house. She was not one of the victims at the time residing in the garage. So then the judge intervenes and he states, you're trying to create, Ms. Baldwin, a false motive without even knowing the facts, because these victims have not testified yet. But I do believe that it does go to show a motive. And so the judge says a motive, and then she says for the defendant. He said a motive in that the defendant attempts to control his family, his wives, his children with violence. And so Mr. Morales says this. He said, Your Honor, the way the case has been charged, the primary thrust of the prosecution is that most of these alleged atrocities that took place in the home and the two of the wives were basically, they're claiming, in prison, but there are no facts to this at all. And
Mm.
this is the way the district attorney is trying to lead this case and say that they were beaten in the garage and the children were beaten in the garage and that they were held there as prisoners when this is not a federal case. This is a state case. And Miss Bodie, there's no evidence that she was ever held as a prisoner. There's no evidence that Adrian Easter was held as a prisoner, and there is no evidence that Miss Cowing was held as a prisoner.
No, hold right there.
This is
Hold a second. There it is right there. It's no evidence.
mm-hmm.
This is what we've been saying. We know mom could have left. We know that Adrian and we know Laura, they weren't held. I mean, this is facts, but continue on.
Bottom line, like you said, they all
Mm-hmm.
had the free will to leave.
Yep.
And Julie put this out there.
Yep.
That's what she did with reading all of this, because it's more that's coming up than this.
Mm-hmm.
But she put that out there, and she's using that motive as an excuse for the other adults not to get in trouble for what they was doing and participating in. So that's what she's doing. All three of them, and that's been established from reading the transcripts, they was able to leave.
Yep.
They was able to leave. Okay. He said the modus operandi, intent, knowledge under the 1101B is irrelevant as it applies to Miss Bodie only. And I think it's a quantum leap for a jury to find the fact that Miss Bodie had been beaten shows some type of motive in him striking the children in this case or the otherwise. However, I don't believe that Miss Cowing was beat and strucken as many times as she said she was, because then this looked like that she's taking over as a child and was mostly abused than more than the children. So I think it's a 352 objection relevancy, and I think it's improper to present this evidence because it doesn't tend to show motive. It certainly doesn't tend to show knowledge. So then the judge said, yeah, and how does it shows motive to control the other two? Now they're going to testify. We don't know what the testimony would be, but you're saying that the testimony would be that two of the wives lived in the garage. She says yes. And he asked, what evidence and facts do you have of that? And Julie states, because they said so. And the judge says, that's incorrect. That's hearsay. Because I have viewed in my private quarters the conditions of those two rooms that were converted from a garage into a room.
Yeah, see
So
right
they're
there.
going
That's
to be
Holmes like right there. See the judge saying it as what that's what we've been saying. She did not live in a garage. That garage was converted into a room, and that's basically what it was. So Julie is
right.
the one that keeps saying garage, garage, garage. Yep.
Yeah, because she had a motive in this.
Yeah.
Certain words she was using. So you're going to be discussing how they were kept in a garage and locked in there. Is that correct? She says yes. He said, but were there any padlocks on the garage? She says no. Were they chained in the garage? She says no. Then how do you say that they were in prison inside of a garage? Because that's what they testified to. He said, and again, that's hearsay. And you are going to be bringing in that they were abused. Is that correct? She says yes. And
with no
that
evidence.
the children, yeah, and that the children were abused because you have child abuse counts. Is that correct? She says correct. So he says, how is it that Miss Bodie's these regularly abused, these children was, and she would come into court and show a motive? I guess, I mean, you either control them or you don't. So he's trying to figure out, how is our mother going to come into court and show a motive on why she allowed her children to be abused?
Okay.
And she says, right. So then the judge said, and it's just one, I'm just wondering how this links up the charges. I mean, it seems to the court that all of these charges and conduct speak for itself because of the severity of the 11 children that lived in the home, how they were brutally abused. But you don't need his motive because there's already evidence there on the children. Well, you would argue a motive for that. Will you argue a motive for that actual charges, which I'm saying are the children in this case? Is there a motive? Well, yeah, he wanted to control them, so he locked them in the garage. Miss Baldwin, that has nothing to do with what I just asked you about the children being abused. I want to toss that aside and talk about the children and the children only being abused. So again, how is it that Miss Bodie testimony is to begin? How is that going to happen that she builds a motive off of not getting her children help and letting them be abused this long of a period of time? Well, I don't think the main thrust of the case, if you will, is strictly related to the people that were living in the garage. Well, it appears to me that the thrust of this whole case is strictly around those 11 children. And I'm talking about the defendant children because I have viewed the files and looked at the severity of the abuse that they went through. I also viewed Mr. Richard Bodie, his current son's file of the extent of abuse he went through. I mean, all of the 206 victims are victims. So we're not going to talk about victims living in the garage. I'm talking about the children victims who were living in the house. I also anticipate that they will testify that they were padlocked and chained in their rooms. Is that correct? Yes, they will allow that. So the judge said, let me stop you there. I don't mean to cut you off, Miss Baldwin. She says, no, that's okay. He says, because your point is well taken, but you're off a little bit about how this trial is going to go. I do not want to bring Miss Cowing into court and naming her as a number one victim that went through decades of abuse when she did not go through decades of abuse, and that she could leave many times based off of all these police reports and dates that I have. He says, all right, she's going to be testifying by these other victims. Let's say living in a house that they were locked in. And obviously you can interfere that there was a motive here is to control them. You don't put a padlock on the door unless you want to control access to the room, or ingest and egress. She says, Julie Baldwin says, I understand, Your Honor, and I would submit to the court's rulings. I know that I argue that the evidence be omitted under the 1109 and the 1101B. So the judge says, well, I want to make sure it's clear to the courts how you want to bring it in, because a motive that the defendant controlled all of these women is not going to pan out. It's not clear relevancy. And at this point, I really don't understand, why are you bringing this into court when we should be focusing on these children? And I'm going to allow it. But what I'm trying to figure out is how that would extend to Miss Bodie being regularly abused, given you have the named victims, 11 of them, that are going to testify along with two other of the defendant's sons. So I just want a clear understanding on these acts. Why are you trying domestic abuse with child abuse? We're not going to do that here. Do you see? Do you understand? She says, yes, I do. I understand what the court is saying. Well, if I understand the court correctly, it's a 352 issue, correct? The judge says it is a 352 issue. I can see there's some probative value, but I think it's because you have so much other evidence that it sounds like you're going to introduce some things to show a motive here, that the whole reason why he abused other women is because the children was being abused, but they didn't do anything about it, is the problem that I have. Why are you doing this, and how are you doing it through these acts? And you're all going to testify to this. But this particular thing that is going on with Miss Bodie being regularly abused throughout her marriage, I just don't see how it would be really giving the time that it would take. When did it happen? How did it happen? Why wasn't it reported? I just would take an undue consumption of time. And again, with all the other evidence that's coming in, it seems to me a little bit suspicious. Okay. So then Mr. Morales says, Your Honor, understanding the courts has ruled, there are going to be a number of witnesses that are going to be testifying about violence occurring within the confines of the house. And I'm assuming the court's ruling is not that these witnesses could not testify about the motive, but rather if Miss Bodie is getting up on the stand and testifying about it. And the judge says, That's what I want to talk about right now. And Miss Baldwin says, Yes. The judge says, Yeah, I'm talking about only on the charges of the children. That's what I want to talk about. She says, Yes. And it's only Miss Bodie who's testifying on behalf of her children, how she was regularly abused and how the defendant regularly abused the kids throughout their marriage. Can she testify to what she saw him do with the children and what she did? And Miss Baldwin says, Oh, yes, definitely. That's my understanding. So then the judge says, and for the 1109 purpose and even the 1101B, which is under the 352, I'm going to exclude it. Okay. And he says, All right, let's go to the next person. So we're getting down to it, Richard.
All right.
Okay. Let's go to Richard Bodie Jr. Okay. Do you want to be heard, Miss Baldwin? She says Richard Bodie is an uncharged victim in this case, and that is the defendant's son. He lives out of the state. So then she states he is uncharged and, yes, an unnamed victim in this case, and he was contacted after the investigation was underway, I believe at the same time in the year of 2001 through 2003. He was asked to come out to California several times, and he was called several times, but he never responded. You hear that, Richard?
They was
You hear what
hunting
you
me down.
did?
They was hunting me
You hear what you was
down.
doing?
I was they was hunting me
Shoot,
down.
I
I'm
would have
telling you,
been dodging them too.
I was dodging because they first of all, I don't know how she got my number. That's the first thing. And somehow she got my number because I remember her constantly calling me, right? But I would never answer the phone. But one time, somehow I got tripped up somehow and I answered the phone. But that's another thing. But yeah,
That's
it's
crazy.
wild. Yeah.
Okay, so she said you was dodging them in 2000 and
Yeah.
2003. You was dodging them. They was sending them letters out to your house and was
I
calling,
check it.
and
I've
you
never.
won't
I,
answer.
I gotta say this one thing. I
Mm-hmm.
remember getting calls. I don't remember a letter. I didn't get a letter until like when they actually got a hold of me, and that's when the dude Zirkle came out. Because I don't remember getting no other letters. If they sent them, I never got them because I wasn't living at the house at
Mm-hmm.
grandma's house at that time. And they was sending stuff there. I was somewhere else living.
Right.
So I don't know what she's talking about with that. But phone calls, yeah, I was dodging those because somebody gave her my cell number. I don't know how that happened though.
And then you say the detective flew out there, right?
Yeah, he did. He came out. He flew out here.
And you had to go to court.
Uh, he said Julius foul. Yeah,
Yes, she is.
yeah. And I had to go to court. Uh, what's his name? Detective Zirkle. He flew out here, right? And I had to go and speak with him at the I think it was at the police department, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Spoke with him, whatever, and he got all the evidence. I'll tell him, what I knew, whatever, which it is what it is. And then I got a subpoena. Yeah, that's the only thing I got. That's what it is. I only remember getting the subpoena. I don't remember no other letters but the subpoena. And I had to go to court. And like I said
Mm-hmm.
before, they had me in there. I was like, "Oh, what's going on?" Gotta raise your right hand. Like it was packed up in there, and they pulled me to a side. Got all these bailiffs and people all around me and everything. They came to a side room, and everybody staring at me. I'm like, this is so embarrassing. One of our aunts came to support me that morning. I'll never forget
Mm-hmm.
it. It just was crazy. That's you can't you have to go. If you don't, they're gonna put you in jail. They're gonna do this, and they got all these bailiffs and police officers all around me and stuff. I'm like, yo, yeah, like I'm the criminal. It was crazy. I'm
Yeah, and
I'm
that's
telling
what
you, it
I
was
say.
crazy.
That's what the system tend to do, is that
Yeah.
they they double victimize the victims
Yep.
in the case. They tend to do that, and that's what they was doing throughout reading this. You know, they was Julie was really fighting to make sure that Laura was this big old victim. She was actually, what she was doing is trying to replace mom
Mm-hmm.
with Laura. Like mom is non-existent, and was trying to replace her children over us like we was non-existent. But I saw the judge kept pushing, like, no,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to do that. I want to speak about these kids. And then she said she was trying to create a motive that Musa had a habit of using children and using these controlling methods to hold on to these women. And I'm trying to figure out, to hold on to these women. First of all, you got a man that got 13 children and been married to somebody for 25 years. And then you have one of them that step into the relationship and she's already married
Yes.
and have two children and
Yep.
have two business, and she's defrauding the welfare system,
Yep.
and she has her own condo and two cars, but she's putting a false story out there that she was kidnapped, held captive, and that he just stole her, just came into a store one day and took her. And so that's how they went. She tried to go about this case, is try to make it about them. Because remember what I told you, I think it was yesterday. Well, we've been talking about this every
Yeah.
day,
Yep.
that the way things went with this case is that the DA had told us, and we talked to several of them. They said this case went on, it went through 15 different district attorneys, and it drug out for almost 10 years. But during that process, it was so many DAs on the case, they didn't know how to try him, because it was a lack of evidence on Laura's side and their children's side that they couldn't find. And she was really fighting for Laura to have these charges put on Musa. I mean, the dates, when you go back to the part one, you guys
Mm-hmm.
got to look at part one, is that the judge saw right through it, all made up dates. But when you look at the police reports that he had in his chambers and files, that's why he said he wasn't buying it. Because if they went out on these dates and she creating some other dates, okay, that's one of the dates was January 1st of 1999, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yep.
social services came out. And
Mm-hmm.
that's in a report. And it was a report that was generated because her son told that his mother was abusing him. And those social workers and sheriffs came out. And so when they came out, they didn't find anything. But then she goes
Mm-hmm.
back and she states that in December of 1998, he struck her and pushed her in a wall, and she got a big old bump on her head. But like he said, how can we say that that even happened to her? It's hearsay, because the dates don't add up. If it was one day, December 31st of 98, that happened, and then you got social services and sheriffs coming out to the house January 1st of 1999, then you should have had a visible bump on your head still. And she was
Mm.
saying that she was recklessly beaten up all the time,
But
all the time.
the judge is saying that where's the evidence basically?
No evidence, no police reports, none of that.
We going yeah, yeah.
But we
Mhm.
getting we getting to
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So we're gonna
Yep.
get back to you.
Yeah, get yeah.
Okay. So after we talked about, I read about the years 2000 and 2003, where they said they had sent letters out, and she said that she had called, but there was no response. It goes down into he was removed from his parents, the defendant and his wife, Miss Bodie, around the age of 3. And in his interview, he disclosed the fact that he was hospitalized at the time. He's not really sure why he was hospitalized, but from that point on, he knew that he had to have surgery on a leg and was confined to a wheelchair. Now, you're talking about a 3-year-old
Yeah.
being 3 years old, confined to a wheelchair
Yeah.
at 3 years old,
Yeah. My leg was broke. I don't know how it happened. I just know they dropped me off at the hospital.
right? For some time after that, but from that point on, he was adopted by his grandparents, who is the defendant's parents. When the officer went out to interview Mr. Richard Bodie Jr., when he decided that he was willing to speak with police, he was aware of what was going on in this case. Was you aware of what was going on in this case?
I already knew what was going on. I mean, they said when I decided to speak, no, y'all decided to come out here. Isn't that like y'all decided to come out here and hunt me down? They subpoenaed me. You know what I'm saying?
3,000.
Come on.
Wow. And so she says, when officers went out to interview Mr. Richard Bodie Jr., when he decided that he was willing to speak with police, he was aware of what was going on in this case. And so the judge says, "Sorry, Miss Baldwin, go ahead." She says, "It's okay." And so she goes on. She says, when he was spoken to by police, he was aware of what was going on with the case here in California. And he disclosed incidents of abuse that occurred, specifically the one that I outlined in my brief, which is the fact that when he was younger, he used to suck his thumb. And that was something that greatly angered the defendant, who is Mr. Richard Bodie's father. And the defendant, in response to him, continued to do that. He would he would step on his thumb to the point where part of the digit had dismantled. To this day, it's completely severed. Wow. Mm. Sorry about that, Rick.
Hey, it
Several.
is what it
Mm.
is. Yeah.
And prior to doing that, the defendant was punishing him by beating him with a belt in his head and using a shoe, I believe, also in the assault. And he was being punished in addition for sucking his thumb, for also trying to get food from the refrigerator. At some point, Mr. Richard Bowley stated that his father locked him in a refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And he would also testify to the fact that I believe other witnesses in this case will also testify to the fact that food was regularly withheld from them as kids as a form of punishment. And another form of punishment that he recalled enduring as a small child was being forced to stand in the corner for hours at a time, sometimes all night or all day long. So, who stated that this happened to them? Mr. Richard Bodie Jr. told the detective that there was times where he would stand in the corner all night long. Okay, so then the judge said, "Are some of the other victims um, um, one of Mr. Muhammad's children as well?" Well, what do you mean, sir? Are these children related to Mr. Richard Bodie? Yes, they all are siblings. And how many of them are there? There's 13 total. Okay. And are those victims, other children, going to testify to this kind of behavior, that they were beaten with the belt, hit in the head for trying to get food? Yes. And withholding food was one of the more common forms of punishment. Some of the kids of the defendant said that the tortured victims, in fact, were all dramatically underweight, according to doctors' notes. Undersized and underdeveloped for all of their ages. Okay. Were the other children standing for hours as well? Yes, all of the children were standing for hours as well, even Lord Cowing's children. Okay, Miss Baldwin, I asked you, and this is the last time that I'm going to ask you not to bring up Miss Cowing's children. Does Miss Cowing have an 18-year-old child that weighs 56 pounds? No, Your Honor, she doesn't. Okay, so I don't want to talk about Miss Cowing's children anymore. So she says yes, they will testify to this. All right. Let's go to other allegations. Allegations by the named victims that they actually had one of their fingers cut off as a form of punishment, because that's mayhem what the defendant did. Ain't that something? So Julie Baldwin says, no, there are no allegations of that. I do anticipate that two of the victims will testify. I know that they're not doctors, but they will testify to the fact that on at least one occasion, one of them had to be taken to the hospital and he was placed in a cast. And who will testify to that? Marlon Bodie and his sister, Crystal Bodie, will testify that one of them suffered a broken hand and Marlon Bodie suffered a broken elbow or shoulders, and I have x-rays. So I anticipate that one of the victims will testify to that. And also some victims on other occasions having that he believes his arm, and I know he probably won't be able to say this, but the fact that his arm was completely swollen on a separate occasion when the defendant took a 4x4 board and cracked it over his head. And who did this happen to? This happened to Marlon Bodie. Okay. Then the judge says, and what section do you want to introduce about this child? Julie Baldwin said this prior incident about Mr. Bodie's finger that was several. And so the judge says, no, the others. She says, those are all parts of those are all parts. That is all named victims that will testify in this case. The defendant's 13 children. Okay. The judge says, but you're talking about Richard Bodie Jr., right? The defendant's son. She says, right, Richard Bodie Jr. is the one that I'm talking about. So if I allow him to testify, which section will that be? She says, I'm asking that Richard Bodie Jr. testimony be brought into this case under the 1109B. And he said, what type of common scheme is that? She states, yes, okay. And then he says, Mr. Morales, would you like to be heard, sir? And Mr. Morales says, well, I don't know if there's a sufficient foundation to show that there was any scheme or plan. The Richard Bodie Jr. incident, the alleged incident occurred out of state, not within the jurisdiction and the confines of this state, and quite a few years ago, because I have all of the medical records. Okay. And then the judge says, was the child living with the defendant when this happened? He said yes. And Ms. Baldwin says yes. And so the judge says, okay. Then Ms. Morales said, I believe so. It's unclear because a lot of these children were in foster cares back in Virginia. They were taken from their parents a lot back and forth for being malnutrition and not getting their shots. And some weren't going to school at appropriate ages. Okay. And who were these children that went into foster care? Lakeisha Bodie, Marcus Bodie, Tiffany Bodie, Crystal Bodie, Sharon Bodie, and Marlon Bodie. And what about Richard Bodie? He was placed with his grandparents. Okay, at one point in time, eventually, Richard Bodie ended up with his grandparents. Again, that is the defendant's parents, I believe. They basically raised him and adopted him, and he's been living with them ever since. There's no in evidence to this case having to do with any of the alleged victims' digits being impacted here in California, being smashed or anything along those lines. This was the judge's asking. So it really is not probative under the 1101B and common plan scheme or knowledge. And I would just ask that what is the scheme that we're talking about? So the judge says, well, I think the scheme here, the plan or motor of operandi, so to speak, is that food, withholding food, is a form of punishment that happened with all the children, all 13 of Mr. Muhammad's children, right? And Julie says yes. Um, so, you know, when did this happen? This happened as they were children growing up. He used this as a form of punishment, which is a common scheme to stand in the corner, which was another thing he did at hours at a time, and sometimes all night. And that they were beaten with belts and hit in the head, if I'm correct. And she says yes. And so the defendant would do this as a form of punishment. Yes, Your Honor. So this is how he acts. And Your Honor, with his children living in the home, these children were gravely abused. I wanted to point that out. Yes, I know they were because I've seen all of their medical records, including Mr. Richard Bodie Jr.'s record. So I would want all these victims here in court to testify due to the fact that we have evidence on all of this information. And Ms. Baldwin says, and I would like to add something further, despite the fact that there are no witnesses that I anticipate getting up here testifying as to limbs actually being severed. I believe each and every one of the victims will get up there and testify to having their hands and feet beaten to the point of bloody, swollen, unable to walk, unable to use their hands, unable to write. Those are the type of things that they will testify to. So although I don't know that anybody else lost a digit as a result, I do believe that beatings that took place on the hands and feet of these 13 children happened because there is evidence of it through their documented physicals. Because, and then the judge says, because I read all of this in the reports that these children were beaten regularly with a boat oar. Is that correct, Ms. Baldwin? She says yes, with the boat oar and other things as well. A boat oar, sticks, water hoses, belts, hammers, and even boards. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Remember Mr. Joey Ruffin was up here
Mm-hmm.
last month, and he talked about
Yep.
how they did a play called
Yep.
Staying Alive. And he
Yep.
said Lord told him that Musa would take a hammer and beat her
Mm-hmm.
son's toes with it.
Yep.
This
We
is what I'm
didn't
talking
happen
about.
to her. This is what we're talking about. Her
This is what I'm talking
Julie
about.
Julie helped her
Mm-hmm.
by going on them shows and twisting this whole case around as if it happened to Laura and her children, and it didn't.
Yeah.
And this is what we get on this channel. People coming at us saying, "Oh, y'all lying, y'all kids," but we were the
For
abused
years.
ones
For
for
years. You know
years.
what I
I'm
want to
talking about.
point
I'm
out
talking
too?
about born into this from the time we
Yeah.
were born.
But I wanted to point out this too,
Yeah.
is that ever since our father got in trouble, every last one of us, all we experience is nothing but dislike from people, hate. You're the ones that's wrong. All of us have been gaslit, like we was the problem. And like you said, we was born into this. And then you have a father that's incarcerated, and he'll call and tell his family lies on you to alienate you from your own family. And how evil is that? How
Yep.
evil is
It's,
that? And it's like when you talk about it, it's like he was doing everything. When I spoke at the
yes,
his board hearing, I was like, he was doing everything, every type of abuse known to man,
he
trying
did
to
it.
attack us any and every way that he could, he was doing. And I listened to some of the conversations he had with you when
Hmm.
he called, and I'm just like, he just the same person. He ain't changed. But the number one thing, like I keep telling you, that do bother me is that how he sat and he kept telling our grandmother
Hey,
the same repeated lie
that's-
over and over and over again. The children here do in fact seem honest. They are getting their time to speak out. However, I think they show a more clear view of the
mhm.
transcripts for the sake of the viewers.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, tell you no lie. These are the facts and
Hmm.
transcripts, and it took time and dedication. Had to take off work to
Yep.
even go speak to DAs and do research, write letters to get
Phone
this
calls
to the
back and
viewer
forth.
that
Yep.
just spoke. Thank you so much.
Hmm.
Appreciate you. You know that it's taken a lot of time. So when you have Tracy Potts sitting up in the audience reading transcripts like it's a story that, oh, Musa shoved poop in the kid's mouth. That's not the way that court clerks type. You know,
And Tracy Potts is Laura henchman.
yeah, living up her ass with all the other shit. Like I said, she talking, and she can keep living up there. So like I said, it's just it's but we getting down to it.
I really appreciate that that comment.
The
That
comment,
was
yeah,
I
I
really
really did. Yeah, that was
yeah.
really uplifting. Yep,
Hmm.
yep. Just divulging the facts and the truth. Okay, so the judge states, because I want to read. I mean, because I read in those reports that the children were beaten with boat oars, and so Miss Baldwin says yes, with the boat oar and other things as well, boat oars, sticks, hammers, and water hoses and belts. So the judge says, all right, the court rules as follows. I'm going to allow it under the 1101B under common scheme or plan. This is his method to punish his children, his 13 children, when he feels that they've done something wrong. So I'm going to allow um, the transcripts from police reports and doctors' reports of Richard Bodie concerning these other children. So that will help the jury understand what happened to the other children as they testify. However, I'm going to allow, in fact, that the defendant stepped on his child's thumb in the case. I'm going to exclude the fact that the digit was several. And then the judge says that's mayhem and it's highly. And what he means by several is okay. Laura went on Murder Unsubscripted,
Yep.
I think in February,
Of
February 5th
2020,
or 6th
20, yeah.
of 2025.
Yeah.
She went on a Murder Unsubscripted podcast, and he
And
ain't
first of
even
all,
in
Moose is
prison.
not a murderer, so why you want
Yeah, he ain't
a
in prison for murder. But she went on a podcast and she told podcaster, it was a lady named Melissa, and I think the guy that heads the podcast, his name was Ed. And she threw Julie Baldwin up under the bus. So Julie, whatever you helped her with, she bit the hand that fed her.
Yep.
Because she said Julie gave her Richard's medical records, and
Hmm.
that's how she knows about all of this stuff. She says that Musa took his army boot. This is how she talked.
Yep.
This is talking without no knowledge of what actually happened, almost like she was in a marriage 25 years ago with our parents. Like she was
Hmm.
there when you was born. And I don't know how that happened. But the way she explained it, she said, well, Musa walked past the child and took his boot and stomped on it real hard, and his finger came off. That's not what happened. And that's why
Nah.
the judge said that he was not going to allow it in court. He said, I'm not going to allow it in there. He said he will allow that he did stomp on your finger. And
Mm.
we're going to get into details because it's coming, what happened. He said, I'm not going to allow that because it's highly inflammatory. If the jury hears that the defendant, this is an unnamed victim in this case, was angry because this child was sucking his thumb, that he stepped on the thumb with such force that it severed the child's digit and his finger fell off and flew across the room, it's very difficult for the jury to be able to distinguish that, and why it's being introduced, not for the character, not for the fact that the named victims actually were abused, but to show a common scheme or plan. I think it will overwhelm the purpose of the statute, and it is not intended to be in court and told this way for the respect of the victim. So, but I will allow it in the fact that he did step on his son's thumb, because other victims are going to testify having their feet and hands beat and slapped as a form of punishment. So I think that falls within that common scheme or plan, but the consequences of the particular punishment that's excluded, what happened as a result of it, it's highly inflammatory. It's not probative, and it really doesn't fall under common scheme or plan. It's just that's what happened. It was just such force that he lost his digit. What I read in his medical report is that his father stepped on his finger to the point that he broke his bone in the inside of his finger. Is that correct? And then Mr. Morales says, yes, Your Honor. And Julie Baldwin said, sorry to go there, Your Honor. He said, well, you're going to see, Julie Baldwin said, well, you're going to see, they're going to see his thumb. The kids are, because they've seen it before. Yeah, but the kids don't know what happened, the judge
Mm-hmm.
tells Julie Baldwin. And only
Yeah.
Mr. Richard Bodie can testify as to what happened. And if he doesn't want to testify, we're not going to make him testify. We can just go along with the medical reports based off of what happened to him. But remember, they're going to get an instruction that I read to them, telling them not to speculate. They can't speculate as to why he lost his thumb. Mr. Bodie could have lost his thumb in a car accident. He could have lost it in an accident at work or a disease. I don't want them speculating. So they can see it, a picture of it, just like if they had somebody come in and testify they lost their leg, unless they testify under oath about why they lost it, and that's relevant to the case. It doesn't matter. It's just a human being that lost one of their digits or one of their arms or legs, and listen to what they have to say. So Mr. Morales says, Your Honor, I did look at the Child Protective Services report on that particular incident quite a few years ago, not 5 years ago for me, not for me, but the report was quite a few years ago, and it indicated that there was an injury to the thumb over a period of time. There was problems, complications that necessitated things. My understanding is that Mr. Muhammad had an issue with his son sucking his thumb, and due to his son continually sucking his thumb, he had a habit of stepping on his son's finger. That was his form of punishment. And what happened is that Mr. Richard Bodie ended up having his thumb partially amputated at the top of the thumb. So there you have it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm excluding it. I'm excluding the consequences of what happened as a result of the thumb being stepped on. All that can come in if he was angry because the child was sucking his thumb at this age, and the punishment that he used, corporal punishment, is what he was charged with, is that he stepped on his thumb really hard and it severed the bone, causing the child to have several surgeries and have his bone in his finger partially amputated. That's it. Not what happened as a result of it. None of that is coming in. And because again, that would be highly inflammatory. That would take up a lot of time because the victim is not here himself, Mr. Richard Bodie, to speak for himself. But there is evidence that it wasn't the fact that he stepped on the thumb and knocked it off like it was mayhem. It was stepped on as a form of punishment from his son sucking his thumb. But later on it was degenerated and didn't get medical help. I don't want to confuse the jury. I don't want them to focus on that. His hand was stepped on by the defendant because he was sucking his thumb, is what I wanted to be focused on. And what I want the jury to know is that how Mr. Richard Bodie suffered from his father doing that. And Mr. Morales says, and Your Honor, I'm assuming that Miss Baldwin will lay the proper foundation and get this person in here to testify about this. It's not going to be one of the other individuals. The judge says all this assumes that the individual is going to testify. This is not coming in unless Mr. Richard Bodie wants to take the stand under oath. Other than that, he does not have to take the stand. I do not want him to be forced to sit up here and relive that. He says, thank you. And then the judge says, I don't know how else you could get him in here, but do not force him to come in here. And so Mr. Morales says, okay. And then Ms. Baldwin says, he's on my witness list. And the judge says, oh, well, he's on your witness list. But again, I don't want him to be forced. And she says, okay. And then the judge says,
hold on, they tried to force me though, for real.
Yeah. And then the judge states, my ruling assumes that people will testify, but I have to change my ruling if Ms. Baldwin come in and says I don't have anybody to testify concerning Mr. Richard Bodie's finger, or if Mr. Richard Bodie does not want to testify. Well, what my concern would be in someone else steps, if someone else steps up and says, I was there, I saw him do it and saw him step on the thumb. But then Ms. Baldwin says, I know that the other kids are aware of the fact that they have a brother that has a missing thumb because of what happened. But I don't know the extent to which they might have witnessed it or not. Well, didn't Mr. Muhammad have another child living with him at the time? Yes, he had a daughter, Lakeisha Bodie. And can she testify as to what actually happened to Mr. Richard Bodie's thumb? No, she cannot. She only states that her father would punish him all the time, every time he sucked his thumb. Okay, we'll see if that's possible. Let's say that in this case, Mr. Morales, I wouldn't allow it in because a foundation couldn't be laid. The kids couldn't testify to why he did it. They could testify, hey, he stepped on his hand, but beyond that, it's all speculation. And this is being introduced into the courts. The courts is allowing it to be introduced as a common scheme or plan, how he deals with punishing his children when they do something he thinks is wrong. That whole part of it would be left out. If you just had somebody say, I saw him step on his hand, then that would be fine. But I don't want you forcing victims to come into court and state that they know what happened when they weren't present. And then Mr. Morales said most of the children in their interviews stated that they did not know what happened, and that in the past they had asked their mother concerning what happened, and that their mother had never had a conversation with them as to why their brother was living with the defendant's parents and why he wasn't raised with them. And Your Honor, just to clarify too, the things that the court has talked about in addition to the stepping on the thumb, including being beaten with the belt, hit in the head with a shoe, hit in the head with a belt buckle, and with respect to Mr. Richard Bodie as well, under the 1101B, is that correct? And the judge says that's correct. And Ms. Baldwin says, okay. Then the judge says, all right, all right. Now this is abuse that he did to Mr. Richard Bodie, so I'm going to allow it in. And then Ms. Baldwin said, this is other abuse. Actually, my intent on this was other abuse, yes, by named victims, but also other abuse that unnamed victims who witnessed abuse of named victims, but also suffered themselves, could be allowed to testify to the extent that it is within the common plan, meaning regular beatings on the hands, feet with objects like boat oars, sticks, water hoses, hammers, and being punished with food. Because I believe that although there were uh, 7 minor children severely malnutrition, and then 4 young teenagers severely malnutrition, there are several medical records that will show you a medical grave concern about the health of all 11 kids and young teenagers that lived in the house that was deprived extensively of food, but did but but did in fact, they suffered food deprivation as a form of punishment on a regular basis. And I believe that they can testify to this.
And what people don't, what I want to explain, of course, the top digit of my thumb is gone, but
Mm-hmm.
also he burnt me also on that same hand, like in the digit, I mean, where the thumb is, but in the web right there, that used to be all red. So it just wasn't the thumb, but it was the whole thumb, but the top part is severed. But also in the web, he poured hot water on me because that used to all be pink, like in the web area of your hand right there. And it's still a scar
Mm.
to this day. I mean, well, the whole area is here, but
Mm.
yeah,
It's a lot though,
it's
because like I
other
said,
stuff too. We not
yeah, it
we
is.
could talk
But
about, but it's more.
this is
Yeah.
stuff that none of us knew. So what he actually did is that, yeah, you were sucking your thumb, and kids do that, but that's not the way that you discipline a child.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do that. You don't do that. And I'm just like, not only witnessing the named victims, their siblings going through that, but also having gone through that themselves under the 1101B. And the judge says, well, I will allow that, and I will allow anything that happened to the children into this case, because there is a long, extremely long trail of horrible child abuse that happened to every last one of them. And I'm speaking directly of the defendant, Mr. Muhammad's children. And so, um, Mr. Morales, I need a list of their names and when it happens. So he's on notice as to what these other victims will testify to, because all I have here is children of the defendant of all the abuse, but I need names attached to each child. I don't know who they are, but I have read all of their files and seen the horrific abuse. Mm, wow. And then Mr. Morales says, well, Your Honor, I have probably 1,500 pages of reports and transcripts throughout the entire interviews of all of the children and the discovery. What children are you talking about? I'm talking about Mr. Muhammad's children. I have 1,500 pages of discovery from back east on things that happened to 7 of the older children individually, and things that they witnessed. Mm, mm. And there are types of conducts which are sometimes inconsistent with the allegations and sometimes consistent. I would just ask that when the people are going to introduce that particular piece of evidence or go into that, that I at least be able to advise to everyone which report it is and when it happened. We're going from what the incident report says and the pictures and all of their medical records, going by what the doctors are talking about. So at least I can be able and be on notice and prepared to cross examine each witness. And so the judge says, okay, my order then is going to be Miss Baldwin would be by Friday have all of the witnesses' name handed out to me. He said, and Miss Morales said, oh, and that's fine. And then the judge says, okay, so I'll give you until Friday, Miss Baldwin, to provide the names. My ruling is this: if there are other unnamed victims that are witnesses in this case, I would like their names, and I would like their names attached to each of their medical records that I saw. And I would like to know what type of abuse that they suffered, whether it was the same kinds of punishment that we're talking about here, beatings on the hand, feet, food being withheld as a form of punishment. They can testify to that, but that you turn over to Mr. Morales the names when it happens immediately, and any reports that you have, turn it over to Mr. Morales. He should have these reports present. But if you could point it out to him to say, now that I know the court's ordered it, then I would have my ruling now that he's given everything that you got based on that, because of the common scheme and plan that I'm going to call. So Mr. Morales knows without just, I don't know who it is. Right. Ms. Baldwin, oh, absolutely. I will definitely do that, Your Honor. And these aren't surprise witnesses. They're all of the defendant's children. What children are you talking about, Ms. Baldwin? I'm talking about Mr. Muhammad's children. Okay, I would like all of their names turned over to Mr. Morales along with all their medical records. And then the judge says, no, I know, but at least Mr. Morales will know before they take the stand what individual is going to testify. This is what they're going to testify to, and it helps him focus on which reports rather than just these were turned over. Mm-mm-mm.
I like how the judge he's saying like which children, Miss Baldwin, because she's
Well,
sneaky.
she's trying to cram everybody in there like she was doing in the beginning with
Yeah.
mom talking about the abuse that she suffered. She was trying to overlap it, that the
Yeah.
very same thing that mom went through, that Laura and Adrian went through. And that's just, that ain't the case.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's why the judge said no, nope. He said, I'm not gonna allow it. I'm not gonna allow our mom to come in there and testify, and then those two women go behind her and say this happened to me too, and there's no police reports, there's no
No.
evidence of it.
And everybody go back and look at we did two videos, one with Laura's son, he didn't know anything on the stand, and her daughter as well. They were on the stand, they didn't know nothing. They kept saying maybe he did, I think so, all this crazy stuff. So
Okay, so we're almost done. Okay, so let's see, we got about 7 more pages and we'll be done. Okay, so she says understood. And then the judge says, anything else, Mr. Morales? He says no. He said, okay, all right. Any other issues? And Ms. Baldwin says, not not immediately. I think we have everything covered. And so Mr. Morales says, I would like to file a discovery motion to make sure I get all evidence from Ms. Baldwin. And she says, oh, yes, I filed a 1054.3 motion in addition to my trial brief. And so the judge says, yes, the motion to compel. And so she says, yes. And so the judge said, is there anything you're missing? And so Ms. Baldwin says, yes, I believe I'm missing at least 4 or 5 camcorder videotapes, which I've asked for on several occasions. However, I've been informed that the defendant is refusing to allow his counsel to provide them to me. I understand that some of that might be impeachment. Impeachment used for impeachment purposes. But I believe that there are also some, I believe that some of these tapes, at least 2 of them, I believe that certain information that I am entitled to in advance of the trial, that Mr. Morales is holding of some information on Laura Cowing threatening Mr. Muhammad's family.
That's what y'all been saying the whole time.
But we lying, huh?
Yeah.
And then the judge says, Mr. Morales, are you planning on introducing these tapes? And Mr. Morales said, Your Honor, I haven't decided yet whether or not I'm going to seek to introduce these tapes. At least two of these tapes are the subject matter of our early 402 motion having to do with possible conflict issues. So at this point in time, I am not certain that I will seek to introduce them. I will say this: two of the tapes, there are about 7 or 8 tapes. Most of them have no value whatsoever. But two of the tapes that I do have is evidence value, at least of Miss Cowing, which is very good evidence to set her up as an impeachment witness for threatening Mr. Muhammad's children, stating that she would burn those motherfuckers up in the house, which is one of the primary complaining witnesses in this particular case that they're trying to use to testify. Now, an impeachment, I'm glad we got to this part. An impeachment witness is not credible. And so he's want to file for her, which they're going to do as we read further. They're going to file her as an impeachment witness, because I recall when I was working on filing paperwork and all that, and you've been through the whole process with me, is that we were speaking to one of the office managers in Riverside, and she stated that why did I care about certain things that Laura had did in the home? And I said I cared because she didn't get in trouble for it. She didn't get in trouble for it. And then I explained to Melissa, I said, you got to look at it. Our father was arrested. Our mother was arrested. Then 7 of our minor siblings was put in foster care. And then the other 5 of us, they put us in mental institutions. Tried to do a 5150 on us for 72 hours. But our grandmother was there with us and walked us through it over the phone. And so they let us go like within, I think, 5 to 8 hours. Because this lady had went and wrote a letter and put in the letter that, yeah, obviously our parents was abusive. But then our siblings got taken. And then we were the younger teenagers that was present. So they came out to a hotel that we was peacefully staying at, trying to build our lives, get jobs, and get stuff together, and took us. And they took us, you talking about false imprisonment. I mean, that's false imprisonment.
Oh, yeah.
What they did, how you talking about kidnap, that's kidnap. Yeah. They came to a hotel on a warrant for our mother, and they removed her out of the room and arrested her. Then they tricked us and told us they had court papers that we've never seen in our lives. And they removed us from the home that we felt peaceful at for the time that we did, and took us and put us in a unmarked white vehicle, took us to a hospital, Loma Linda Behavior Center, and tried to have all of us committed because Laura wrote in letters that we all was mentally insane and we couldn't take care of ourselves. So now we have both our parents locked up, all 7 of our siblings in foster care, then all 5 of us, we sitting up looking stupid. And her plan was, because like I said, she had a lot of tactics in the home, things that she would do. And we've all talked about that here on this podcast and also on the Dr. Phil show, that all she would do is plot and plan. She had a scheme for everything. And guess what? I'm not even surprised to tell you in my life right now that she got away, that she beat the system. She got away. I'm not even surprised. I was surprised early on
Yeah.
when this happened that how can't they see and why don't they believe us? It was what she wrote them and what she was doing behind the scenes. And I know she was doing that because how many people have we set up and called
Yeah, a lot.
and they told us
Yeah.
lies that she has
Mm-hmm.
told them behind the scenes and we're unaware of it. We're aware of it. We're aware of it now.
Yeah.
And so her scheme was when she wrote that letter, like I've been stating, my siblings, all of our siblings, if they feel that they're thankful to her for writing that letter, they can feel that way. But I'm just gonna tell you the honest truth. I'll never feel that way. Never.
I don't
Because
blame
I
you.
lived in that home and that's not what I saw. I saw something totally different than
Well,
what she
the
put
court
out there.
transcript show that nothing happened to her and her
Yeah,
kids, and it shows that. I mean,
yeah.
as we keep going through it.
Everything that she states in these transcripts is hearsay. Hearsay. You have not a police report, a picture, and I've said this 2 years ago. I've asked her when we was on the Dr. Phil show, can we see some pictures? Can we see? Because you know why? You
Mm-hmm.
recorded us.
Yeah.
You took pictures of us
Yep.
and you handed it over to that people. But we want to see pictures of you, of all of
And
this
your
stuff that
children,
you
yeah.
saying and your children. We have not seen any, any. And in these transcripts, the judge saying he don't see any. He don't see
But,
any.
but she went out there and she did a movie, which is false.
Anybody can
Documentaries,
make a movie. Anybody
yeah,
can make a movie.
documentaries, doing plays, doing all
Yeah.
types of stuff, making money off our family. And the minute we say something, oh, those kids are lying.
Yep. Like I said, it's a mess. I just look at what she did in that home, how she plotted, planned things, how she premeditated stuff.
Laura is horrible. Is she watching you
She
all? I
probably
hope.
is.
Yeah.
She ain't got no shame in her game. Yeah. She probably sitting up watching all of us and trying to figure out her next scheme. What I'm a scheme to do next. You done made enough money off all of us, I hope. Hopefully the money she made off of us, like she said she get ready to retire, it'll retire her. But like I said, my hopes and prayers is that she's never able to make another dime off of us and that there is something legally being done. And the same way we kept going until we finished it, getting these with all these lawsuits, it's going to be finished.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be finished because I'm just like, this is just ridiculous that somebody could go to this length and that you can do all that stuff. And I wonder, like I said last week, in the back of Julie's head, do you have a doubt, Julie, in your head? A doubt that this lady lied to you and to Rick Zirkle, that she sat up and lied to you?
They know she lied.
Oh, I know they did, but they did it for their jobs.
Yeah.
They did it to get promotions. I know they did. So getting back to the transcripts, let's see if we got three more pages. So he goes down into saying that he would like to file paperwork for Laura to be an impeachment hearing. And that's another thing, an impeachment witness. That's another thing. Julie knew about Laura's background. She knew a lot of things that she had done as far as doing identity theft, using a bunch of names, using people's social security numbers, filing false taxes, having false names, putting names up under false businesses, um, defrauding the welfare system. They knew all of that.
They
There
sure did.
had to be some type immunity or some type of deal that they gave her for all the stuff that she have done. And then you look at these videos that you got somebody that's threatening kids' lives, you know, and you got Moose's attorney wants to file for her to be an impeachment witness. And then not just that, getting back to our family, just pretty much trying to lock all of us up was her
Yeah.
plan, to lock all of us up. Oh, forget about them. This thing is going to go to trial as a domestic abuse case
That's what
because
they
the
was trying to do.
5 young teenagers, they're locked up in the mental facility. The 7 minor children, they're in foster care. The mom and dad is going to be locked up. They're not going to get through this. And then to say in her testimony that they hated me. They hated me. Why
You
would you
trying to
say
you're trying to kill them in the home. What do you
Why would
think?
you say they hated me in the testimony? Kids don't just hate people for nothing if you ain't done anything. And you did plenty. You did plenty. You did plenty. It was already enough suffering going on. And when she came around and he brought that other one around, it made things worse. It made things worse. They knew his ticks, they knew things about him. So, this is Mr. Morales still speaking. So that having been said, I have not made a decision as to whether I'm going to seek to introduce that because there are some issues between my client and myself with reference to that material. My client has indicated to me that he objects to me turning over any of the tapes to the prosecution under the theory that it's product of the materials, that they might do something to it because he feels that the state is protecting Miss Laura Cowing from getting busted from a lot of things that she has done. And it's his desire to introduce, if the proper foundation can be laid, at least in court, based off of how Miss Cowing was extremely rude and volatile to his family, how she didn't like them, and how she wanted only herself and Mr. Muhammad and his children, her children, to be with him, that she did not want Mr. Muhammad's children or his wife no longer in his life. So my client is stating that he would like to lay the foundation based off those tapes, that Miss Cowan was jealous and that a lot of these things that she is alleging and saying that she's doing it because she's a rageful person. So that's where I want to start at. And so the judge says, do you feel if the product works, Mr. Morales? Do you feel that the product works, Mr. Morales? He said, Mr. Morales said, you don't have to turn, the judge said, you don't have to turn over everything just yet, but I would like to see the product in my final chambers and then find out what Miss Cowan has been told and what she has been given. And so Mr. Morales said, well, I think that's it. I do not believe that it is technical product work to be putting out right now. But if this split happens to where Miss Baldwin is going to introduce Miss Cowing as this big old victim, we would like to show it. Mm, wow.
Mm.
And so I have 2 of the tapes, and 2 of the tapes have been splitting up. A portion of the tape was sent to the Supreme Court to make a decision off of Miss Cowing's behavior on threats against Mr. Muhammad's children. They haven't gotten back to me yet. I should be hearing from them soon, but I would like to file paperwork for her to be an impeachment witness while she's on the stand testifying. But that having been said, I did bring the tapes with me this afternoon. I have them with me for you to view in your chambers. What I would ask the court to do is reserve a ruling on that motion. I left a message with the California Bar to get some input from them as to what my position should be with reference to the tapes themselves, whether it would be ineffective assistant of counsel not to move into evidence or ineffective assistant of counsel to move them into evidence if I have. But Your Honor, whether these tapes are introduced or not, eventually these children will see these tapes and get a hold of these tapes. But primarily to getting a little more information from the bar, I would ask the court just to reserve rulings. I will give Ms. Baldwin absolutely enough time. We're going to be here for a month or longer or so, and I'll give her enough time to look at them. If the court rules it's discoverable, then we will present them, and we will have them presented in court. And then the judge said, well, I'm going to grant your request and have Miss Cowing testify as an impeachment witness. I think you're making a good faith effort to figure out whether or not you're going to be using them, whether you need to turn them over to the state bar, and I will have a copy as well. The courts will note, though, Ms. Baldwin is correct. The courts feel that you have to turn it over, and you've already stated that you feel you do need to turn them over, so you will turn them over. Is that correct? Yes. And based on what you just said, the court believes that you feel you're going to use them because you said it's great impeachment material against Miss Cowing. So if you weren't sure because you didn't know what she was going to testify to and you didn't know if she was going to tell the truth, that would be one thing. But it sounds to me like you already know that if she testifies, that this tape is at least present to show that she is falsifying a lot of things that she said that happened. I will reserve that ruling and schedule her as an impeachment witness. Mm-mm-mm. Your Honor, I understand. And just so the record is clear, I have not spoken with anyone at the bar yet. I'm still waiting on a call from them, but they're telling me step by step on what to do about this evidence. And then the judge says, well, that's why I'm going to reserve you for the call to take in effect. And you are correct. We're going to be in trial for over a month, and we're not even going to start evidence until May 5th. And Mr. Morales said, what I would do, Your Honor, if the court wants me to, I will make a copy of the two tapes that I believe are relevant, which they are relevant, and give you copies and give Miss Baldwin copies. I've already sent the state bar copies, and these two tapes are under seal in the courts. And that's it. We're back to the front. So that's a wrap, everybody. It's a wrap.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Did you want to look at? I don't know if you want to do your side notes.
Yeah, what I wanted to talk about is impeachment witness.
Okay.
So pretty much an impeachment witness is a witness that is not credible, which the district attorney's office had already told us that Lord Cowan was not a credible witness in this case at all. And so impeachment witness examples refer to the specific individuals who testify in court to remove an official or the evidence attorney uses to discredit a witness in a standard trial. Wait, let me go back. Okay. An impeachment witness is the process of discrediting a person's testimony during cross examination by revealing inconsistencies, biasness, or contradictions in their testimony. Attorneys use this strategy to cast doubt on the witness' reliability and damage their overall credibility in the eyes of the judge and the jury. So that's what an impeachment witness is. So get into the sidebar notes. As we opened in the beginning, we talked about. Are you with me, Rick?
Yeah, I'm just I didn't know which way you was gonna go because I know you had
Okay,
some
so we
side
talked
note.
about way up
Hmm.
at the top.
Yeah.
We talked about in the beginning the
Hmm.
opening of this second part
Yeah.
of the trial.
Hmm.
And so that's a wrap. So we did part
Yeah.
one and part two. So that's how everything started.
Yeah. Like I said, y'all go
So
back and watch part one if you haven't. So.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
watch part one.
And I know you wanted to talk about Julie, how she used our
Yeah,
mother.
no, just
Yeah.
throughout part one, and we just
Yeah.
finished up part two.
Okay.
Julie went back and forth,
Hmm.
trying to confuse the judge into believing that Laura Cowan was this big domestic victim that had endured so much abuse that it ruled over our entire family of what we
Hmm.
had been through.
Yeah.
So she was trying to basically make all of us feel like that we didn't matter. Matter of fact, that's what she did,
Yeah.
because we just gonna use you guys and that's it.
And like we
For
say, just trying to
example,
replace everybody. Like
yeah,
you know
like I
you.
remember you
Hmm.
mentioning, and I
Hmm.
remember Marcus mentioning that when you look at all, I mean, it's a lot because it's a long history. When you got somebody that's been doing this over 20 years,
Hmm.
it's a far. I mean, she's been further than all of us. Far things that she's been planting in the media. Even some other stuff we just found out about. It's it's
Yeah,
like
that
the
documentary that's on
documentary
HBO.
that
Yeah,
I watched that was crazy.
it's another one out there, y'all. We could probably do a video on that, but I'm trying to get some information so I can like show some of it. But if y'all are following the page and you're watching like the shorts, you'll see what I'm talking about. And on Facebook, I've been posting up there as well. And
Yeah.
I heard about this one that were the what Evil Lives Here, but they actually it's on HBO. Said Evil Lives Here, but it's actually
House of Horrors.
yeah, House of Horrors if you go on HBO.
Mhm.
So it's kind of it's it got two
I,
names, but you'll see
I
it.
think I think what they doing is that they kind of hiding it,
Hmm.
and they didn't get as much hype off of it
Yeah.
because they might have saw some inconsistencies,
Hmm.
you know, and I'm telling you, I know 1,000% they know that she's lying.
Yeah, they know.
See, they know. I know they know she's lying.
Because they just want to they want to move, they want to produce something. So Hollywood is evil. They don't care.
Yep.
Yeah. So I didn't know if
So
you was going.
getting back,
Mhm.
getting back to what I was going to tell you about you and Marcus, I recall a while back where you and Marcus was talking about all these articles and stuff that's out there. People pay attention to what she's talking about. She's talking about all of us. She
Exactly.
manages to talk a little bit about herself,
Hmm.
but then she transitions herself and her kids and all of us together.
Yep.
That's what she does. And then breakout, it's all about me,
Hmm.
and like all of this stuff happened to me, and like they was just the afterthought.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, yeah, that's what we've been
Yeah.
talking about the whole time.
And just throughout reading part one and part two of the opening of the trial, we didn't know this stuff. We kind of speculated some of this stuff, but we didn't know it was as deep, as this. But throughout reading those transcripts, you can tell that Julie used our mother to put. She used our mother to put Laura in mom's place. She wanted mom to testify about abuse that she went through so Laura Cowan could jump on the bandwagon and say that it happened to me too. And then I'm also really looking into, I'm trying to figure out if all of us, none of us was in court with each other. And I think I said that before.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out is how is all this stuff coming head to head that these kids is saying this stuff that they saying. Laura's kids saying the stuff that they said. Unless you had somebody going back
And telling her.
telling them, because like I
Hmm.
said, Julie, I mean, Detective Zerko,
Yeah.
Laura,
Yep.
and her three kids. Those were the five people that testified. They testified, five people that testified. We didn't testify till later. They
Yeah.
had plenty of time to go, because remember we was going into like we was reading the
Hmm. The
pre-opening of the
pretrial.
trial.
Yeah. Yeah.
We was going through that ourselves. They was calling us back and forth in and telling us how to act on the stand, how to testify, asking us questions about what happened. So we don't know if they was going back, taking information, going giving it to Laura, because a lot of stuff that mom endured, it's a lot of stuff. Like I said, I don't remember and I don't know, but I know a lot of the older siblings
Hmm.
knew, but it's just the stuff that Laura says out of her mouth that our mother went through. It's like, how would you know that? Because our mother didn't talk to her. So I know somebody gave her information, even when it came to your finger.
Yeah.
It
How would
was
she
like
know?
you wasn't even in court when all of us testified. I didn't even know this stuff was presented. A lot of this stuff, I didn't know anything about none of our siblings' testimonies. This is a surprise.
But Laura knew.
But I knew that it was something wrong, something went right. And none of us testified in court that Laura was abused.
Laura didn't have anybody on her side. First of all,
No,
right?
she didn't.
Yeah,
Nobody
to
in there
corroborate her
testified,
story. Yeah.
because Janet Masters, which we're gonna get into next week. Janet
Hmm.
Masters, our neighbor that lived beside of us or across from us on Robert Street in Paris, California, knew of our whole family. And they tried to get her into court to testify. And she said she won't gonna testify because the stuff that Laura, and I'm telling you, when we do the next video, everybody tune in. The lady states that she was not gonna testify because the things that Laura stated, that them investigators came out to her house and said Laura said that lady knew, that lady said that was a lie. She said, I'm not testifying to that because I never saw no such thing, and I knew both of them. And then you got neighbors that lived in the front of us, back of us, right and left,
Hmm.
that said they saw her every day, her and our father leaving. And now all of a sudden you breaking it all the way down to, oh, it was 6 months. First, it was in 1980 he held her hostage. From 1980 to 99, he held her hostage. Then it was 1989, he held her hostage. This was not even a federal case. It was a state case. And what she's doing is a lot of people I'm noticing that been commenting, they're confused. They're saying they're confused. And the reason why they're confused because Laura is mixing up Musa's case, which is a state case, with her husband's federal case. And that's why people are confused. I understood why Mr. Ruffin was confused, but that's still not no excuse
Yeah, for him to do that
to
play.
be a producer
Hmm.
in Cleveland. You supposed to know about this stuff.
And there's no excuse for Lifetime either.
No, it's no excuse for nobody. Period. All of them say, and I noticed this, all the journalists that I spoke to, all the newscasters that I've spoken to, any producer that I've spoken to, you know what all of them say?
What?
We didn't know. We didn't know. That's what they're saying.
Mm.
And that right there, that's not good. That's not good at all.
Did you want to do any the other side notes, or you want to
Uh
hold off on that? It's up to you. It's up to you because I know
if you
you.
want to start next week before we
We can.
start,
Yeah, we can start.
yeah, we can finish this up next week because we got another
Yeah,
show
because there's a
coming.
lot. Yeah, we probably can add
And
this on
then
the
we're gonna
show
you
for
said we're
next
gonna do
week.
some other
Hmm.
2 days a week.
Yeah, we're gonna start dropping some other videos, y'all. We're gonna still do
Yeah.
live, but we're gonna give us, I say, what, 2 weeks, Crystal, whatever, because we're gonna start
Mm-hmm.
recording some other videos, and just start dropping those as regular videos while we do the live. Because we're just trying to get all the information out there, so we're gonna be doing a lot over the weekend as well. So
Yep.
yeah, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Watch part 1 to this, put it all together.
Yeah.
Watch all our videos first of all. Yeah,
Yeah, but before you watch part two, watch part one because
yeah,
it's something else. And like I said,
yeah,
we got more.
yeah,
This is not
yeah.
it. And thank you to everybody that tuned in and that was watching. I think Marlon and Nikosi was up there, I think.
You know, yeah, they be jumping in and out.
Yeah. But thanks to everybody and then everybody that made a comment. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
But there's more.
yeah. All right, everyone. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see y'all next week.
Good night.